And so before we get to the fire and spice and you kind of standing your own ground, what were some of your early experiences? Let's go right back. What was something unique about the way in which you were brought up that shaped your journey to becoming a tech entrepreneur?
Well, for me, my family comes from the jungles of the Congo. If you saw my grandma, she has her tribal scars and her tribal tattoos still tattooed on her face. And my mom does too. My mom was the first one educated. And so they come from the jungles of the Congo. And then I am the first one in my family to be born in the United States. My two older brothers were born in the Congo. And so I basically have 1 foot in the Congo, 1 foot in the US. I'm too like African to be African American, and I'm too American for my cousins to consider me African. So I always live in this like interesting dichotomy. But what that also meant is that a lot of my childhood was spent explaining, teaching my cousins English, explaining the math, explaining technology to them. They're just more exposed and I had to naturally teach them. So I early on became the tech person in my house. Like I was very much the tech person, very much the math person. And one of my earliest memories with technology was changing my computer, the computer in my preschool or my kindergarten. It used to say like, "Good morning, Mrs. Kaiser's class." And I could change it to say, "Good morning, Gloria." And I would get in trouble like all the time for changing it. But I remember being able to change it. Like I could do it so early. And I was like, man, well, like I could program the computer like that super early all the time. And nobody said like, "Oh, this girl is, bright." Well, they might have said she was bright, but like, it was always something that got me in trouble. But I loved
instead of encouraged.
And growing up, I was probably one of the nerdiest kids that you could think of. I did like extra schoolwork in the summertime. My electives were Algebra 2 and aerodynamics. Those are like the classes that I chose when I could have free classes. I really liked watching anything that had to do with space and science, but that was just me. That's how I grew up. I was lucky to have a private school education growing up and had real access to all of these great arts and technology and challenging courses. But never did I ever think like, I was not going to go to college or I wasn't able. That didn't happen until I went to high school. I went to a public high school, and that at 10th or 11th grade, I wanted to go to Stanford. And so I had asked my teacher if I could sit in when Stanford came to our school to talk about how to get in and whatnot. And she was like, "Well, people of your kind don't really go to Stanford. I need to reserve that for someone who actually can get in." And at the time, I think I had like a 3.95 GPA. I was varsity track star for 4 years. I'd done drama. I was like the most excellent candidate for Stanford. But what it made me realize was like that no matter how hard I tried at something, there was going to be a gatekeeper that actually had the access to whether or not I could move forward. And that really derailed me for a long time because, I had always wanted to go to Stanford. It was like my dream. So it really put a lot of things on the back burner, and it really made life difficult for a long time. And then probably about 10 years later, I was working in something, still helping at calling the IT desk and telling them exactly what they needed to fix in order to like make things work. And someone in our IT department was like, "Gloria, you're always calling with the right solution. Why don't you just go into technology?" And I was like, "Well, what would happen if I tried?" And so I researched, okay, how much would I make? How much money would I make? Because that's like the first question.
Yeah.
And how much schooling would it take? And what would it really encompass? And what would happen if I just took steps to go into that direction? And I realized that the money that I was making, I would make like 5 times more if I was in technology. I'd have a job for the rest of my life if I was in technology. The schooling wasn't going to be that difficult. So at the time I was finishing up my bachelor's degree, did all the prereqs for a master's degree at the same time, working full time, and just had my oldest son. So I tell people I didn't watch television for like 2.5 years. I had no clue what was going on outside my little world.
Gloria, wow. Who are you? Gosh, that is incredible.
It was amazing because once I made that switch, it was instant. Like the first year of having just programming classes and whatnot, I was able to get into tech work and then, scale down the jobs and really focus on what I wanted to do. And it completely changed my life and put me on the direction I'm on now.
That's incredible. But Gloria, but the discrimination surely didn't stop there. It didn't stop when when you didn't go to Stanford, your teacher's like, look, that's not for you. Because if we think of the tech sector, especially at the time when you would have entered into that space, we think of hoodies, we think of young white boys tracking around with headphones on, a very exclusive kind of environment. So what was it like for you walking into certain environments where there was lack of representation? And how did it, and what were the challenges in being your authentic self in those spaces?
So it was challenging in so many levels. For me, I had a good mentor, and her saying to me was like, Gloria, you're the unicorn. You are like the Black girl that knows tech. There's nothing like that out there. And I thought she meant like at my school, like here I am in SoCal, of course, there's nothing like that. But when I get to the Valley, the tech Mecca, it's going to have hundreds and thousands of Black women.
There'll be thousands of me.
Yeah. Thousands, and so one of the things that was very noticeable out the back was how isolating it was to be in that minority group, because my friends that had same culture, same boy groups or whatever, they would get together and study all the time. They could share each other's notes. They would work on assignments together. And I didn't have that shared bond. So it was really like, I had to know what I was doing all the time. And so I had this like A team that I basically made where it was like a whole bunch of guys and then me all the time. And I had to really, like the tech world is not known for having the most like socially aware guys. And like when you have me
that's right
coming into class all the time and just schooling them on stuff, it made for a lot of very awkward scenarios. And I had to grow some really thick skin, but I had to also I really craved seeing someone that just did what I was doing that looked like me. Like it was 3 years before I saw another Black woman that worked in tech, And when I would get really, really low, I would watch IT Crowd. I'd be Moss from IT Crowd. And the other Black person in tech right now that I have in my veins, and can like really help me through it. And it was what I like, even to this day, if I have a low point or I'm really hitting a wall, I just watch some IT Crowd because it just me, the nerdy Black person in the IT room, like that was what I could identify with it. And that was what taught me how much representation matters, because other than Moss and IT Crowd,
wow,
there was not any representation of a Black woman or really even a woman in films doing IT work. You couldn't see it on a poster. It wasn't in a magazine. There wasn't like a network of people that were working together on that. So it was extremely isolating. And now we have like Hidden Figures and Black Panther and all of these stuff that are like really like, patting people on the back for being Black women in tech. But it was definitely a mental struggle to get in.
Wow.
My first day when I finally was like the Black woman in a tech office, made it to Square, I realized I went on this walk through San Francisco. You go through the Tenderloin, which is like a very gritty part of the city, but there's thousands of Black people there. And you see all these buses that are going to all these tech giants all over, and none of the Black people in the community are getting on these buses to go to these tech offices. And then you get in the tech offices and it's all like, all white, all monotonous, all very like the same, And I realized that the tech industry pays hundreds of thousands of dollars to recruit from Harvard and Stanford and Yale and all over the place, but in their own city, the community doesn't have jobs in their own industry that runs the city, And wow. If I was in Texas, like every kid in Texas knows how to get a job in the oil field. It should be the same in the Bay Area, where every kid that grew up in the Bay Area knows how to get a job in the tech industry. That's not how it is. There's tons of diversity around though. There's tons of diversity right there in their own backyard, but we're not growing the tech talent organically and then, or even engaging with the tech talent that's right there in our own backyard. So.
And so Gloria, so from this, and not only did you excel at school and in college, you then went on to excel in tech. So you've just referenced Square. And so for people who are not familiar with Square, it was a company which was founded by Jack Dorsey in 2010. Gloria then joined Square in 2015, 5 years into its infancy. So it's still pretty embryonic at that stage, right? So you're still a startup, only 5 years in. And Square was a piece of revolutionary technology that turned a mobile phone or tablet into a point of payment, right? So you could then use your Bluetooth via your phone or the tablet and then pay for things. So it was really revolutionary for people who worked in markets or worked, in the street and didn't have the setup of a payment system. So what was your mandate when you joined that business, when you joined Square?
Yes. I was lucky enough to report to Jack, or like to have to deal with Jack directly, and having a lot of freeway from our C-levels to say, like, we believe in diversity is important. Let's, move the needle forward. I didn't have mandates in like numbers that we wanted to try to achieve, but they knew that with what I did and what I cared about, I wanted to make cultural shifts. Now, Square has offices. We actually have one in the UK. We have one in San Francisco, New York. We have one in Toronto, but we also have one in St. Louis, Missouri, where Ferguson happened. And so we have to, as a tech company, really be very cognizant of what is the experiences of our workers during that time. And so we've had some incidents, unfortunately, there have been so many police brutality shootings that I can't remember exactly which shooting it was, but I remember in response to one, I think it was Philando Castro, that we said in response to it, we had like a statement put out, from Square at the time. And I remember going back and forth with our comms team of saying, like, well, that we're not going to put out a statement, or are we? Most tech companies aren't. And I was like, well, how many of these tech companies are happened where Ferguson have that office and understand that community? And that was when we realized, like, okay, we do have people that we have to really be cognizant of, not only our customers, but also our staff that works for us. So we put out a statement, and we really started to change how we did hiring, and really look at a diversity issue from a people perspective. Like, how is it to be the only on your team? And how is it
of anything, the only of anything, right? Yeah.
And how do you feel comfortable, like, in it, and produce the best work if you feel like you have to hold back your authentic self? You can't do it. So even if you're on a team where you are the only, but someone is aware that you are the only and have things that you might be holding back on, it makes it easier to navigate if someone's giving you space for that, And so I was encouraging for people, like, just be your authentic self, whatever that means, whatever does that mean. And us as an organization, we're going to need to, kind of move in the direction where people can be their authentic selves, so that we can have better products, but we can also have a better work environment for our teams, and have like ease of mind that, like, we're creating the best work and hiring the best talent out there. And it was different. A lot of the things that we've done before of going to only Ivy League schools and hiring engineers changed. And we engaged with HBCUs and schools of women colleges. And the thing from coming from a hacker's perspective was, like, I knew which schools were doing well from, like, hackathons and, like, this culture of anybody can build anything. But I also know that talent is distributed equally. It's not just the white men that are, like, the geniuses. No, it's equally across the board. What holds us back is biases. And the only way I can explain this is, like, remember, like, this last summer or spring when there was that big beef with Stormzy and Wiley?
Oh, yes.
You remember that? It's like a big beef with Stormzy and Wiley. And it had, like, everything stopped. And it was like, okay, what is this? Now I could tell someone, like, I could have a question that was like, tell me about how the fall of Rome and Stormzy and Wiley's beef are the same, right? If you don't know who Stormzy or Wiley is, you're not going to be able to answer that question. A lot of times the hiring practices that we use are made from these biases, where you have two parts of a question and one part of it someone could have cultural context and understand, and they could answer the question amazingly if they had that cultural context. And then we say, oh, because you don't have this cultural context, you don't know the answer of this question, But if I said, Stormzy and Wiley had this beef and one came out the winner based on technology, and it felt like a changing of the guard. This also happened in the fall of Rome, where technology aided with, the fall of an empire. Can you tell me of a time when something fell in your life based on technology? And let someone bring it up to their culture and then had that be the matrix?
Yeah, because they have a point of reference.
The point of reference, cultural content, it actually removes a lot of the biases and it makes it be like an even board to judge people on. And a lot of times our tech questions, especially in engineering, they'll be like, how many golf balls can you fit in a school bus? Well, if you've never played golf or never seen golf, how do you know what the size of a golf ball is? That size school bus even, these are things that we're not thinking about, but then you weed out candidates that thought slow or took a long time because they couldn't answer the question because it was only made from one perspective and not had the cultural perspective. It wasn't, how many golf balls of a size of 1 inch can you fit in a school bus that is 15 feet long? It's how many golf balls can you fit in a school bus? I'm thinking that everybody comes from the same perspective, and that's not how life is right now. I mean, that's not how life really is ever. So I always try to mitigate as much bias that we can and give people the best experience that they can. And even if it means like, oh, we're going to go to an HBCU and none of these people are ever going to get hired this first round immediately, we'll plant the seed so that we're engaging in the part where those kids can at least, do a technical interview or come next round and know like when they should be applying or whatnot, because a lot of that factors into why diverse candidates are not selected into these tech companies. They don't know when the application window is. They don't know what the interview is supposed to look like. Like if you come to a technical interview thinking it's like a traditional interview where if you just wore a suit and tie and you could like, talk
charm somebody. Yeah, absolutely.
Trying, but
yeah, Gloria, absolutely. It's giving the feedback, isn't it? And sharing the gap. And
it's sharing the knowledge and like,
yes.
That. But that's the thing that people don't recognize is that when you are the only, you don't get information from your friend that was the intern at Facebook the year before. You don't get that information of like, what did they ask you? What do you wear? How, it's not cultural knowledge like that. So you have to kind of carve your own path and you're carving it in the dark. And there's not like feedback of like, why didn't this person work or whatnot? There's none of that. And as an industry, we just sat there and said, hey, let's give this guidance out. So at least we can like have an even playing field or like really get the best candidates and say, you apply in July if you want a scholarship or internship for the next year. Well, most kids think about interning in January. So some of this knowledge stuff is like, there's no benefit to the industry by holding it trade secret, like let's put it out there, really try to, have these people be the best that they can be. And also recognize that, it might not be the computer science student that's your best student. It might not be the kid. I've had kids from Harvard that were great computer science students, but came into the workforce and couldn't talk to anybody or like ask for help. And so then it became a detriment. But I've also had kids that were liberal arts majors or didn't go to college at all. Like I never understood why we made that even a requirement to apply, that you're required to have like a college diploma or, have gone to college, when we've had a history of having some of the most innovative people in the tech world drop out of college.
Who dropped out? Your former boss included.
My former boss,
Jack Dorsey, former boss included. He left. He did not graduate.
No, I told him, I was like, Jack, you wouldn't even get into the own company you're running.
That's right. Isn't that insane? Isn't that insane?
To my desk, it would have been weeded out. Yeah, which is absolutely like mind blowing to me. Like you're just, and I mean, now it's like my son right now at 12 can like, code anything. He can get with his friends and make a little community and whatnot. By the time he's 16, I'm like, I might not even have to send you to college. You can just go and do your field. You'll have 4 years of experience and it's perfect for an intern.
Wow.
Yeah.
Goodness me. And so tell me a little bit about that, because what was really important here is that you have emphasized the fact of how it feels to be the only in the room. But we know, and so at Rubik, where we partner with organizations and we try to, bring them along on this journey, for me, the conversation has to start at the top. And at the top, they are not the only. So could you tell us a little bit why it was important to Jack Dorsey at that time and the senior leadership, and what tone did that set for the business in terms of how you were able to really enforce a cultural change there?
Oh yeah. So I always say the big changes are made from the top down, because the top can move. They're like closest to budget. They can move as many like hurdles that are there. Whereas me at the bottom is like, this is a hurdle. Like it might not really talk to anyone. And one of the examples I can think of off the top was like our career landing page. So as an only, for me, the first thing I check of whether or not I'm going to apply at your organization is your career landing page. Am I going to be the only at your career, in your office, in your company? And our career landing page was just like mostly white men, And when you got into Square at the time, it was like actually pretty diverse. There were people from all different backgrounds. And so I kept bringing it up like, hey, we need to change our landing page, or can I at least get different pictures or something? Because I feel like it's weeding people out. And finally, everyone kept saying, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. When I was raising it from the top down. And finally, one day I went directly to our head of comms directly. And I said, this needs to change. Oh, I said, no. I said, you know how a picture's worth 1,000 words? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, what story do you think we're telling people when they apply at Square? And he's like, well, surely it's not just all white men. And I was like, oh, it's so funny. And I did that for 10 pictures. And he was like, how much budget do you need? And I said, give me $500,000, let's change it. And we changed the whole way that we did our careers page and a landing page. And it had diverse people apply, it told a bigger story. It really started to really think about, what we had as a group there. And the other time I can think of a time, and this is again at Square, was like one time when we were, after Trump had won, which was a shock for a lot of people at work, the mood in the office was very low. And so I said, okay, I asked our head of people, can we have just a room, like for 30 minutes, we'll just cry it all out and then we'll all get back to work. And she's like, fine. So we sent an email out to the company saying, okay, at 11, we're gonna get into this room. We'll just, talk about our things and we'll just, cry it out and we'll just get back to work. And this room that held 50 people in it, and it was supposed to be one room in San Fran with 50 people. It turned out into every room across, or every city, every office across had their biggest room. Our room had 300 people in it, and a half an hour meeting turned into 3 hours. And what happened there was we started to realize that people's concerns were not just like, is this person racist, but like, what does this mean for the LGBT community? What is this going to mean for our Muslims? What is this going to mean for our Black community? What is this going to mean for our immigrant community, where tech has a lot of people coming in from whatnot? And after that meeting, almost instantly, our C-levels were able to see like, okay, we're going to have to switch our focus from being SF focused to like internationally focused. If you want to go to any other office that Square has, you can to any other office. And that was something that a C-level saw and was able to move and change almost immediately. So it has to be top down, because the C-levels have the power to change culture in seconds, whereas bottom up has to try to change culture in like
Absolutely. And Gloria, I've got one more question for you before I'm going to hand over to Greg and Lily to see if they've got any questions, because we have tons and I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Gloria, I mean, I could literally listen to you all afternoon. So the one thing, so I would really love to understand then, how difficult was it for you to apply a diverse perspective in organizations that are traditionally less inclusive in their structure?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think of two things. I think of well, automatically I know that the way someone is looking at me is lower than what I can actually accomplish. Like, so I feel like they usually have the bar so low based on their own biases or whatever, that they think so little of me. And I'm always had to be the high achiever just due to circumstances, that I can achieve so high so quickly, like it's nothing, And I think that happens with a lot of onlys, where they have to have their foot in both worlds. They have had to like constantly achieve, constantly prove, whatnot, that they're really able to execute like it's nothing, because they've overcome a lot of obstacles in that perspective. So I always keep that in the back of my mind, but I also always think like I am a unique asset to this company. Like my perspective alone is a unique asset to this company. If I can use my voice and feel empowered, I can like make this company millions or save them millions, or like make sure that they're not going into a pitfall, or see a new spin on how this can be done. And so personally, I always see myself as an asset, and know that even if they don't see me as an asset yet, it's just a limitation on their view, And then
Wow.
my own like true self, I'm like 100% me. If you schedule a meeting with me on a Wednesday, which is a wash day, I'm gonna show up with a t-shirt on my head, and I'm gonna be me 100% at the time. Like I'm just me, and if anything, it's going to be a learning opportunity, and you're going to learn about Black hair real quick. Like that's just a reality. Like I try to tell people, I'm like, you can't be so old and not like know, and then like educate people. But like the world is so big that like not knowing, not experiencing is not okay anymore. And I have
Yes.
this the best example I can think about this is like when I went to Amsterdam, my liberal self is like, this city is really beautiful. Where is the LGBT part of the city? And the people were so offended that I would think that it needed to be excluded, and it wasn't just included into the fabric of.
Oh, wow.
Made me think about how I deal with any type of other, like how is it not included into the fabric of my life, or into the fabric of my business, or into the fabric of what I think of it. So I see that as like a teachable moment for me. Is like I have to make sure that I see others, or anything that's diverse, as something that is a benefit and needs to be included into my life. And it's my role to make sure that it's included,
as opposed to having a place for that thing and popping it in that box. Yeah, wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, no, celebrating Black history, one day or 1 month a year, or or even like just with my US perspective, I'm like, no, I really should know. It's almost like, how I got into grime was like, oh, I don't know US hip hop, but I actually like grime, and I actually like
French.
I
love that you know who they are. I'm impressed that you knew who they were. I was like, wow, Wyndham Stormzy. Wow.
The grime symphony right now was like my favorite proms. I love like, what was it, Pow with a
Pow, Lethal Bizzle.
Oh,
Yes. Wow, Gloria.
And I'm just like, this is great. And it's all of the like cultural stuff, like, so to me, it's a cool experience. It only adds things to your life. It never
Yes.
takes things from your life.
That is brilliant. Gloria, I'm about to open up now to Greg. He was hot on coming off on mute. Wow, he was hot on coming off mute. So
definitely.
Yeah, over to Greg first then.
Yeah, Gloria, it's always amazing listening to you as well, and just understanding what you had to go through in terms of your journey to be where you are currently at the present moment, and also taken from your own personal experience and using that equity to actually help, organizations evolve as well. Amongst the many questions that I would love to ask you, one of which, first and foremost, what would you identify as the key changes that have led to the hiring of more diverse talent, and what are the continuing obstacles?
Yeah, so for the diverse talent, I think a lot of it, representation has changed, and technology has changed. Everyone has phones in their hands, so people are learning how to program it more. Access to information has changed. A lot of the knowledge sharing has changed. What I think is going to be extremely interesting is like in the UK, you have a computer science for all initiative where all kids have to learn computer science. So it kind of takes away some of those barriers that most of us had, where only certain kids could have access to it. And it exposes people to computer science a lot. easier. So my projections is that the diversity numbers will probably change as far as the interest. So going into computer science, into university from that perspective will change in the UK faster than it changes in the US just by having access alone. Now, the bias still might be there for hiring because I don't know if the US even knows what UK top schools per se are to hire in from too. So there's that limitation of perspective. But I think that that might not even be necessary. Like if you can create the ecosystem where you have like removals of the bias in VC funding. Like there's a lot of biases here. So you're talking about biases in like college applications and in education, biases in hiring practices and advancements, and biases in access to VC funding. So even if you were a bright Black child, excelled at computer science, you still got to get hired. And if you didn't feel comfortable in your workplace and you wanted to venture out on your own, you still got to figure out how to get funded on that. Now at GetCoin, we are completely the opposite, where if you have an interest in computer science and you create a project and your project is bright, you can get funded. Your project can get funded by these grants that are done quadratically. It's this whole process. But basically, if the community says, yes, this is great, you get more funding and it's community funded. And then that helps you launch your business as you go. So you can actually launch a business without any VC funding at all that you need. And I think that those type of ecosystems are popping up a lot faster, and we might see more progress there where it's going to be Black-owned tech companies. It's going to be all different types of people. I mean, look at Nigeria right now, and you see Nigeria is a huge tech capital right now with a lot of great talent coming out of there. And that is a lot of a sleeper state for most tech companies because they don't understand the landscape, they don't understand the culture, they don't understand, how big of a booming industry, and they have the limited perspective. So I think that there's going to be a shift from people thinking like they need to make it into a big four to be considered successful to going to, I can define my own version of what success is and be comfortable with it.
I think that's amazing. It really opens up opportunities for a lot of people, like you mentioned, to really be able to make their way through the industry. Amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Welcome.
I think Lily might have a question. If not, I've got...
No, Greg. No, Greg. You up.
Christina, see, she's blocking my blessings.
Firstly, I'd really like to read out Suzanne's question from chat. So Suzanne says, there's a lack of women going into STEM subjects in the UK. How do you ensure that companies do not absolve themselves of their responsibilities to provide opportunities to women interested in transitioning into or progressing within tech industries?
That's a big question.
This is a great question. And so I also think that you don't need to have a STEM background to be good in tech. My best friend, she is the director of management at LinkedIn. Her background is art. She took art history, whatnot. She deals with all of the images and how LinkedIn feels and whatnot for it. So we have to kind of get away from thinking that you need to have a STEM background in it. But the one thing that we do need to do is when people express interest, let them give them a try. And it can be interest in things that are STEM based, like playing with a Lego set. Like if you feel that Legos are for boys and not for girls or whatever, or you have to give these gendered Lego sets to people, then it's kind of limiting people's access to it. So when people have an expressed interest or give them a try, you got to support that. You can ask, you want to see how this works? And most of the time people are curious. They will want to see how something works. Do you want to make your website for yourselves and like change it? I mean, it's amazing how many of my engineering friends started with MySpace, being able to change the background on MySpace and having things. And so I think a lot of the, how do we encourage women to go into STEM that's not the right question per se. I feel like it's more like, how do we stop discouraging women to go into STEM or to think STEM is this different thing? Because if you take things where traditionally women are great at, or stereotypically, like cooking is all STEM, it's just chemistry. You're just adding different components and getting a reaction due to different like outside elements versus heat or freezing or whatnot. That's all still STEM. And women traditionally, you know, have been said like, yes, you can go into cooking. Well, that's STEM. Like, how's cooking any different than anything else? You know, so I think like we have to stop discouraging them from following their passions and really letting women just go where they're passionate about things, and hoping that like we remove as many barriers to entry for them to have what they want to have. Now, when they're in the workplace, we also need to stop describing what a successful manager would be, or a successful C-level person is like, based on attributes that are somewhat biased towards, you know, men, or where women get demoted for being assertive, but yeah, a man gets like praised for being assertive. So I always say, well, is assertiveness a good quality or a bad quality? Is that what we're looking for? It doesn't matter who is like having it gender-wise. So I think removing as much biases and like really kind of encouraging people to follow what they are excited about and giving them exposure to things that are exciting helps. And that can be for little girls like books. It can be, you know, what are they watching? What are they playing with? Older girls, it's just giving them the opportunity, maybe in a safe environment where they feel comfortable, like in that they're not going to be mocked or laughed at or whatnot. And then not giving negative connotations. Like in my family, you become a doctor, a nurse, maybe a teacher, an engineer, and the computer science really wasn't the way to go. But I told all my nieces, I'm like, look at me, I can buy whatever I want to buy. I can do whatever I want to do. I travel the world all the time. This is not a bad career. You can go for it. And it's great. I can work from home. I can work from wherever. It's a great thing. What I'm more worried about is the lack of promotion from entry level to mid-level. And what that does, and the retention rate. Like we always talk about hiring rates, but we don't talk about retention rates. And retention rates will tell me a lot more about your organization.
Yes.
Are you supportive when they do have children and come back to work? Are you supportive of the male counterparts that are having it? Do you have the same expectations? Like, am I seen as being less of a team member because I don't hang out after school at the bar, or after work at the bar because I have to go home and be with my children? You know, like, what are the requirements that we're having for advancements? And are those requirements actually biased, or are they really barriers to entry for people to move up? And a lot of times you'll see that those requirements are biased towards male counterparts. And I tell my friends all the time, because it would be like, oh, I went to a meetup and I had to bring my kids with me. And I was learning, I wanted to learn this new thing. And the guy was like, well, why are you here with your kids? And I was like, oh, well, do you have kids? And he's like, yeah, they're at home with my wife. And I said, yeah, well, in my relationship,
that's why.
Like, I bring my kids. So like, there we go.
I love that. Yeah, I'm the wife.
I'm the wife.
Gloria, that's brilliant. I'm just conscious, Gloria, we've got 10 minutes to go and quite a few questions have come in the chat. So we just want to get round them, as many as we can. Greg, would you like to kick off with one of those?
Sure, we had some burning questions here which actually follow on from what you were saying earlier on, Gloria, about retention rates and what organizations can do. So this one here is very particular, from Nicola. She says, I'm really interested in how organizations within a sector, telecoms particularly, in her case, can come together and attract, train and retain female talent. Any thoughts on how that particular sector can come together, drive this, and increase the pool of candidates applying for jobs?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that you can do within your sector. I always say you work inside out. So like the first part is having like someone who is higher up, like as a mentor and or advisor to a group that's within your company. So if there's like a woman in telecoms group or at all in your org, if you're the only woman in your org, find someone else, another org, and have lunches together. Just have lunch together. And what happens is like you start to see what are issues that need to be raised up, what are hurdles, what are barriers to entry. And usually someone who's higher up in a C-level can say like, oh, well, we can remove this in X, Y, and Z way. After that, it is important to have a connection with the schools that are coming in. So a lot of times you have one of two types of schools. You have a school that does have like gender equity in their systems, usually gender parity, like, you know, 1-to-1. And they're looking for like mentors, or they're looking for people to come in and talk. That's the easiest way to like change the numbers if you really wanted to, is to figure out who has the talent already there that you can help. The other side of it is who.
And when you say schools, Gloria, you mean universities?
Universities, yeah, universities.
Exactly.
And so you can either go back and teach, you know, have workshops in these universities, have like one-on-one sessions, have panels on what do you do, kind of bringing the insight from the industry back into those universities. But also what it does is it creates a person, a representation that looks like them doing what they're wanting to do, but also someone who they can ask questions to, someone who can give you those guidance, someone who's now in the network to say, yes, you applied during this time, or you changed this way, and things of that nature. We did this at Square, where we noticed that there weren't women managers, or women weren't as managers. Like our C-level said, why aren't there more women managers? One of the reasons why there weren't women managers is because you had to pass like an interviewing thing, and then you had to have an interview question. They said, well, why aren't there women interview questions? And it's because the women didn't know what was the time cadence to set up an interview question. That was really just that one piece. So then we had a special session for women to have interview questions and design an interview question, provide feedback for it, really change that gains. And then we went to this big conference, Grace Hopper, where there's 30,000 women. And we said, out of everyone who applies, when they have 4 interviews, one of those interviews must be with a woman. And the reason was not to like showcase like, hey, we have women managers, but we really wanted to at least give them the chance to ask a woman manager a question that they could ask and impact their career, whether they went with Square or didn't. We were the only company that had that, all women managers panels, and it really changed our retention, because most people wanted to then go with us because they had never interviewed with another woman, let alone a woman manager.
Wow.
So it just changed a lot of that landscape. And I think that if we as an industry like kind of had that, where it's like, how can we lift these, what's the barrier that's blocking this othered group? Can we remove that barrier, and can we move it up? And so then we did that with like, okay, the Black Sat group, you know, how come there are not more managers there? What's their barrier? How our LGBT group, what's the barrier that they're facing, you know? And they're all different barriers, but how do we remove this barrier? And it only happens when a C-level is engaged with this group of others and says, I want to take their problems and remove their barriers and continue to advance them forward. So that's why it has to start with the top. It can't always be at the bottom.
And Gloria, for us at Rubik as a recruitment business, we are huge fans of hiring outside of sector. So in the same way that your friend from LinkedIn, whose background is in art, we are all about the wildcard candidate. So if you're looking at telecoms, if you're looking at tech, if you look outside, look at adjacent industry, look further afield, because you suddenly get to tap into a whole other kind of talent that's previously been overlooked. And it's usually something so simple as that, but people just, because, you know, there's a real kind of incestuous nature around recruitment, around hiring, around the networks which people go to dip in and out of. So yeah, look outside of industry.
For sure. I mean, and take more time. I think the average recruiter spends 6 seconds on a resume, which means that they know absolutely nothing. Of course, they're just cherry picking what is easy for them.
Yes.
But the best talent comes from, you know, not cherry picking and really having these deep connections. And that's what gives you the greatest ROI later, because you have people who are connected to the company and stay for long periods of time.
Great. Gloria, I've got one final question before we will say goodbye to everybody today. So from your perspective, what are some of the mentalities or attitudes that need to be shifted to create a more inclusive structure within tech?
I would say that there's one type of person that would excel. You know, I think that we think that having someone that has like, I'm going to put it this way. We shouldn't be limiting people. Like I was held back by people's limiting thoughts, limiting me and my advancement. And I think a lot of times we exclude people out and saying, this person won't work, this person won't work, this person won't work. And instead we need to say like, what is it within our structure? How can we make this work better? You know, how can we make this as inclusive as possible? Because by saying like our company doesn't work for one group of people, it means our product doesn't work for one group of people. You know, like it's just that well, and we want our product to be available for everybody. So I think of like seeing people who are, you know, have like no limbs and thinking like, okay, well, a car is not accessible to them. Well, actually a car is accessible to them if you have all the right adaptations on the car and let them drive. Their desire to drive a car does not change. I can't say that that person doesn't want to drive a car because they don't have the limbs. They might be a huge car enthusiast, and there's tons of people out there. But what needs to adapt within me, my perspective, to make it possible? And I think if we start to think from that perspective, what needs to happen for me to make it possible for every high schooler in the UK to have an internship at a tech company? What has to change? You know, okay, we got to get them flights. They got to be able to have housing. We got to figure out what schools do we get them from. You know, it's like instead of weeding them out, let's hire them in, because I think it's 2040 is when we're going to have a massive deficit of talent and compared to jobs. And we have to be as inclusive as possible as a society to let people be working on the problems. All you're doing is trying to get problem solvers. And when you have people that can see problems a different way, it's kind of like a Rubik's cube. They can solve it when they decide that they can solve it, but you have to not tell them like there's only one way to solve this problem based on your own perspective. So I would say, like, how can I include people in and stop saying, how can I weed talent out?
That's fantastic. Gloria, thank you so much. There are so many more questions in here, and there was one from Jamie around kind of books and networks we should be looking at, and we will capture that question, and Jamie, we will send that to you along with everybody else who's joined this evening as a bit of a takeaway document to make sure that we've gone back to every single person. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining this evening. Gloria, thank you especially for joining us all the way from sunny Orange County. It's been an absolute pleasure. So big round of applause for Gloria. It was absolutely fantastic, Gloria. Thank you for your insights.
Hi, Camille, I see you. One of my mentees is in the group. I can see her.
Oh, fantastic. Hi, Camille.
I'm the most proud of is Camille. She works at Lucas Labs, worked at Pixar. She's living her dream life right now.
Oh my goodness, she's living my dream life. Wow.
Amazing. So hi, Camille, I see you. All right.
Thank you very much, Gloria. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everybody at Rubik.
Thank you, Memoria. Thank you for your support. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much. And Gloria will be in touch.
Thank you,
absolutely
guys.
Fantastic. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Feel free to reach out. And if you have questions, just reach out to me on Twitter. I can answer your questions there too.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Gloria. Absolute star. Take care, guys.